After a successful business career as a corporate communications executive and consultant in the video, telecom, and internet sectors, Lela Goldstein put full focus on her collage and mixed media in 2018. Since then, she has sold several pieces and has exhibited in Arizona, California, and New York. Her artwork often incorporates vintage and originally designed papers, and much of it has a mid-century modern sensibility. A lifelong film enthusiast and vintage postcard collector, Lela holds a BFA degree in film and television from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts and did graduate work in museum studies at the Johns Hopkins University. She resides in Scottsdale, Arizona. Lela, it is so great to have you here. Thanks for joining us on the latest version.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, that's great. And, you know, before we started this, when we were kind of talking, in full disclosure, we're college roommates at NYU. You were more film. I was more television and radio. But I always knew you as Lela Cocoros. I was Betsy Hills. Now I'm Betsy Bush. Now you're Lela Goldstein, but you also have a dual identity in your corporate career as Lela Cocoros, keeping your maiden name. And it was funny going back and forth about what do we call each other, right?
Yes. It can get very confusing.
Yes. And it's something men never have to worry about, right?
No. And when I got married, I changed my name legally to Goldstein, but my career was taking off, and I was known as Lela Cocoros. And so throughout my very long career, 30 plus years, I'm known to a lot of people as Cocoros, which is hard to spell, hard to pronounce. So when I switched over to my art side of my life, I decided to present myself as Lela Goldstein, which is a lot easier for people to, kind of understand and spell and all that stuff. So,
well, it's also kind of an interesting way of being the latest version of yourself, right? It's kind of pivoting from corporate to your new artistic. Whatever this is that you are now doing, which I think is so...
My pursuit.
Your pursuit, that's right. And honestly, the word hobby does not appear on this podcast.
Right.
We're not building model airplanes in the basement. These are serious pursuits that we take seriously wherever it may go, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your corporate career, because I was very impressed that you were so much a part of, or your career took you almost from the beginning of the cable television, from the beginnings of that industry to, wherever it goes next. But you were actually interviewed as an oral history project.
Yes, we're that old, right?
Yeah.
but wise.
But it was funny to hear your interviewer say that when you started out, CNN was only a couple of years old, which is kind of astonishing, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, if you remember back then, when we were in college, that was really when a lot of the cable networks started around that time. Mm-hmm. ESPN started in 79 and CNN started in 80. And of course, MTV started in 1981. So there was really an explosion of ad-supported, satellite-delivered programming. And actually, in the cable industry actually started in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. It was a way to deliver broadcast signals to remote areas or even cities where there are, tall buildings and broadcast signals couldn't cross through. So actually, I started right at the time of the explosion of programming. So when you say cable TV now, that's pretty much what people think about. So it was a very exciting time and a explosion of growth, which really was exciting to be part of.
It was also the sort of thing, describing those early days, it almost sounded like you had real pioneer types, real entrepreneurial types.
Very much so.
Yeah. I wouldn't say, maybe there's some analogy to the internet age then, but they had a very different, the guys, the early figures in cable were kind of older, but pioneering types.
They were mainly guys, with some women, actually. The company that I worked for, TCI, which was eventually bought by AT&T and then was bought again by Comcast, actually started with a couple named Bob and Betsy Magnus. And they were actually, they were from Oklahoma, and they actually started the company in their kitchen by buying cable systems in the 1950s. And Betsy Magnus actually did all the books and everything from the kitchen table. So she was really part of that beginning.
Wow.
But a lot of them were World War II veterans. A lot of them were engineers by trade. Some of them owned TV repair shops. And they built this incredible industry, which ultimately did lead to the internet. And it led to the commercial distribution of residential high-speed internet. So I was part of that as well. We launched a company called At Home back in the early 90s. And, from there, all kinds of stuff has happened.
That's kind of amazing, right? The technology over which we are talking to each other today, you
can trace those roots back to the cable industry. Yep,
wow.
Absolutely. Broadband, technology really made it possible.
Right. And your role was you were a corporate communicator who had very good writing skills.
Right. That's how I really rose up through the ranks. TCI at the time was the largest cable company. Laughably, it was, today because of, how big Comcast is. But at the time, it was the largest of the cable operating companies. And they were based in Denver, Colorado. So I took off. My first job in cable was in New York City for a trade association called the Cable Advertising Bureau, which tried to get advertisers to take a really good look at national cable networks as an advertising medium, which back then was also a challenge. It's hard to believe now, targeted advertising was not something that broadcast, with the broadcast mindset, people were really even contemplating. And now it's micro targeting.
Right.
But I wanted to get out of New York, and Denver was a place at the time where there were a lot of cable companies headquartered. And so I took off without a job and wound up at TCI and stayed there for 15 years with a brief detour back to New York for a job at NBC corporate. As their VP of Corporate Communications in 1997. But I got an offer I couldn't refuse to go back to TCI. That was at the time that they were getting ready to sell the company. And because I had been there for 12 years and they had, I'd known a lot of the players and a lot of the dynamics of the company, they made me a really great offer to return. Even though I really did enjoy my brief stint at NBC at 30 Rock,
right,
with a really nice office on the 25th floor and overlooking the observation deck sign and the Radio City Music Hall.
Wow.
Kind of corner there. Anyway, it was worth going back. And my son at the time was turning 8 years old. My husband decided he wanted to become a teacher after we came back. So it gave him a chance to do something different that he always wanted to do. So it worked out really well.
Oh, fantastic! And you eventually started your own consulting company with another partner from that same
Yes,
uh,
era.
era, and you ran that successfully for 10 years. And then when the moment came when you thought, now's a good time to exit, and you did that and moved to Scottsdale. So how do you become interested in collage? And let me just say, I encourage everyone to check out Lela's Facebook page at Artworks by Lela on your Facebook page, correct?
Yes.
And also on the latest version podcast.com website, we will also have pictures of Lela's artwork, which is really, really, it's just so wonderful and creative. And when I hear about your corporate career, the writing and creative ideas, but how does that translate to visual artistic success? How did that happen?
Well, I'm just really, I feel like I'm just getting started. My career was, and then, being a mom and my, the whole family, dynamic made it really challenging to even think about doing anything else. And so for many years, having been in film school, and really being trained through that whole storytelling element, I really had an interest in visual. I'm still a really huge film buff, and so just getting more involved in the visual arts, just as a spectator, right? And I always had a love for museums, which is why I did some work in the Johns Hopkins program, which I unfortunately couldn't finish because I started another job in a digital marketing company, and that was around 2013. But I really have always loved the visual, photographs, paper, ephemera. It has always been interesting to me. I've been a postcard collector since I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And so all these postcards, it's primarily from that 50s, 60s, 70s time frame, right? Road trip, type images, and, the giant rabbits and jackalopes and all that kind of stuff. I've always had an interest in just pictures and colors and visual elements. And I really didn't see myself after film school as going into being a filmmaker. That just wasn't what I realized was really my interest, my passion on the making side, right? So when I finally had the time to really think about it, I took out some of my old postcards and started to play with them. And I had done some collages when I was growing up too. I had taken a lot of women's magazines and the ads for, Cascade detergent and whatever it is, the products, right, that you see on a grocery shelf. And I cut them all out and put them on a box and, kind of varnish it or whatever. So I've always had this instinct to do that type of thing. I'm not a very good I don't draw very well.
Oh, I was going to ask if that was, also something in your toolbox of skills.
But not really. It really isn't. But I think I know how to put pieces together. And there's been a lot of talk and in the collage world, because there are a lot of Facebook groups, and there's a wonderful magazine called Collage, Kolaj, coming out of Canada, that is very academic and in their approach to kind of talking about the art of collage.
Interesting.
Some incredible work is being done, but it is kind of like this is what we did in kindergarten kind of thing. And so the respect isn't quite there at this point, although it's getting a lot better. That New York Times article recently about collage from the 1920s, Juan Gris and some of the Picassos and Brocks and that type of thing, starts to, create a dialogue, I guess, about this is an art form, right?
Wasn't that interesting? And I'll try to get a link to that article onto my website because that was so cool. The beginnings of collage, where the Cubist artists were started to, instead of painting in a headline from a newspaper, that Le Monde or something that someone might be reading at a table, they just stripped in the actual newspaper or a part of a page from a novel. And what I thought was interesting about that article was they could identify the newspaper and the books that those collages came from, and they were kind of down market, kind of seedy, what we would think of as kind of a rag, publication.
But, like pulp novels.
Right, pulp
like
novels and not exactly high-toned fare, and that there was just all these newspapers, like 70 daily newspapers were being printed in Paris at the turn of the century. So there was just all of this ephemeral media, the news media and magazines and things like that. And I really identify with with one of your collages in particular, where you do cut out a model kitchen from the 50s or 60s and put in those kind of advertising logos or characters or things like that were so much a part of, mid-century life. That media was always, that printed media was always there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm always on the lookout for old magazines, and primarily like home magazines and women's magazines and things like that. I mean, a lot of people keep the Life and Look magazines and that, the kind of the newsy ones, but and National Geographics, of course. But the ones that I really enjoy are the ones about, the kitchen of the future. And,
the recipes and the
so I've collected
tips.
a lot of books and magazines, and readers from the 1950s and 60s and old yearbooks from the 50s and things like that. And I haven't really used a whole lot of them at this point. It's almost hard to kind of go out and take a scissors and cut into them, but I'm trying to free myself to think that if it's just on a shelf, right, like my postcards, if they're just in a box, nobody's really going to see them.
Right.
So there are certain postcards that from friends and things like that I won't cut up. But I went to a postcard show and this guy had a bunch of postcards that he sold me for $20, like this huge box.
Wow.
So I have a lot of material to work with. Let me just put it that way. And I try to be as organized as I can to, file it the right way.
Well, speaking of postcards, you have that wonderful banner collage on your Facebook page of the all the motel signs and the swimming pools and that kind of low-slung modern architecture, all the road trip, motels that you have,
all those motels that a lot of them are gone now, but some of them have been restored into their mid-century glory. I know there was one on Long Island, I think, that they renovated it to be, a much higher, higher quality version of the the old kidney-shaped pools.
Yes. And the signage has that that astro look to it, the starbursts and things like that. Before the chains came along and kind of swept aside all of those independently owned kinds of businesses. But that's just a wonderful piece, and I encourage anyone who's listening to go check out Artworks by Lela on Facebook. So how do you develop your craft? I mean, you've talked about other resources. Are there workshops? Do you take lessons? Are there internet resources that you use?
Yes, and yes.
Yes.
I had not taken an art class since junior high school, I think, unless you count like the photography classes we took at NYU. Right. And So when I moved here to Scottsdale, when we moved here in 2017, I started looking around for classes and things like that, and I wound up taking several classes, different types of classes, and I was really exploring at that point. I wasn't really sure what my kind of area of focus was going to be, other than I knew that collage was going to be probably at the center of it. So I took classes in. I took a collage class. I took an kind of a mixed media abstract layering type class, and then I've taken a few other classes. I I tried oil painting, but that was really not my thing. But I also took a cold wax oil painting class where it's not just about the cold wax and oil, but it's also about integrating papers into your work and things like that. And those were the ones that I really enjoyed the most. And then I'm currently taking an internet class from a person who has a website called collage.biz. And she's a collagist. I think she's based in Dallas. And she's got several classes, that you can that encourage you to, just do like a collage a day or things like that. But I'm not taking those classes at this point. I'm taking the class that she has that's about the business, about branding your collage business, and ways in which you can get the word out and that type of thing. And that's a lot of what I've known all my life in my cable life, in my business side. But and I'm still doing some consulting for. I've got a Silicon Valley client, a technology client, and I'm also working on a book for somebody. I'm project managing a book for one of the companies that was big in the cable industry back in the late 1990s and into the 2000s. So I like to keep kind of both my both hands in the different pots. It's kind of fun.
You're very busy. You must have. Do you have a studio? Do you have an area set aside that is only for collage?
I do.
That must be one of the things
in my kitchen, which is not a big. We've downsized considerably. So I have a high table that's I think it's about 24 or 36 inches square, and I cover the floor with a drop cloth or plastic or whatever, and the top and all of that, and that's where I do most of my cutting and pasting. And actually I do a lot of my cutting upstairs. I've got a desk for my business and a desk for my art over on the other side of the room, and I do a lot of cutting and just organizing up here. And downstairs I'll bring what I need and then create some papers as well. I do some papers that I paint and use stencils and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
So those are the skills that I kind of learned along the way that I didn't even think about back when I was saying, hey, I'd like to try this.
So you cut upstairs and you paste downstairs. Do you have a little trail of little paper scraps going up and down?
I have been known to have that trail. Yes, but I keep a big paper recycle bag upstairs and downstairs. So hopefully it's not too messy. But you improvise. You find ways to do it. I know. An artist who has a closet that he's turned into his studio. So, and certainly people in New York, I think, are used to small spaces.
Right. Right. Turning I don't know if anyone has an extra closet, but turning a closet into a workspace by putting a desk, in there, and then you have shelving and stuff like that. And then you can close the door, hopefully, and, make it go away for a little bit.
And I have a lot of my stuff in a closet right here, where if you open, and you can see the boxes in the back, I've got a stack of boxes, which all have other boxes that have images in them, or just plain, different colored papers and postcards. postcards are heavier, so I kind of keep them safe. I mean, it's not safe, but separate from the. I kind of keep separate postcards, because they're not as pliable as the paper. So I like to have an even texture going. So if I do postcards, I do postcards or, heavier paper, and the lighter paper, the magazine papers and things like that. I just finished something where I used magazine papers as my background, and then used, kind of the papers that I created and collected for the main image.
So
experimenting.
And I'm wondering, maybe you already answered this, but what role do you see this playing in your life? Is it something you want to develop into more of a, is it something you do to relax, or is it something you're really hoping to expand and become, I don't know, something bigger than that?
I'm going to see what happens. I think that's the best. I don't need to make this a big business, and I'm not sure that's really what I want to do. So I'm playing around with it. I'm learning a lot, which is good. And, I just enjoy it. I find it great therapy, especially during the COVID crisis.
Yes.
It was really wonderful to just have a chance to look at, what I've got and start to think about. I've got a journal where I keep ideas and do some experimentation on, what does this medium look like on this type of paper and that type of thing. So there's always something, and certainly for me, starting so late, there's so much to learn that I'm not really sure how this is going to evolve over time in terms of taking over my life or whatever. But it is certainly a big part of my life now, a big part. And I try to, hone it and practice it if I can. If not every day, then, every few days.
Wow.
And I'm very good at, taking one hat off and putting the other hat on. I've been doing that for a long time in different, because of family, because of, elder parents, the whole thing where you say, okay, this has to be my priority now. The rest of it has to be, set aside or not as focused on that part of my life. So, it comes fairly easily to me to just say, okay, I've done my work for the day for the clients that I have. I can't go any further on this project. I'm going to go downstairs and, create something.
Oh, that's cool. One of the posts on your Facebook page mentioned that, I don't know, your first grade teacher at some moment said to you, Lela, you'll never be an artist. And that maybe that was something you'd carried around with you.
It certainly was. Yep. Miss Demanda, who, was actually, she liked me a lot. And I wound up being the narrator of the school play because I could recite and memorize better than I can now. And it was Chicken Little, I think, of the play. But I didn't get to dress up in a costume or be on stage other than standing there in my little dress, was kind of telling the story. So that was the beginning of my career, I guess. But we were doing a Christmas project, a holiday, construction paper and glue and the cotton balls that, you're supposed to paste onto the construction paper to make a snowman.
Of course.
And of course, the glue and the paste and, got on my hands, and then I touched a, cotton ball and it just got all over my hands. And she just looked down at me and said, Lela, you'll never be an artist, which really stung, I think.
Yeah.
And, but it maybe motivated me. I don't know. I mean, I wound up going to film school and getting a fine arts degree and, and made a career out of it, which, I don't know if you can do that as easily these days. it's almost like you have to have the educational background to fit into the business world. But I was lucky enough to take all of that and apply it to a company that was really open to being, having a different perspective, which was really fun.
Which is all about also creative thinking.
Yes.
Bringing that to the field and bringing a lot of your outside knowledge to a field and being creative with what you already know, and bringing that to a
innovation
career.
is really, I know people throw that term around a lot, but it really is very valuable to a company and to a business. So what I didn't have in the MBA department, I brought to the storytelling and the culture and the relationship building and all of that. It was really kind of where I was stationing myself, as I kind of grew into my career.
Mm-hmm. When you think about the pivot you've made from your corporate career to being a collagist, what 3 pieces of advice do you have to women who are also thinking not necessarily of being a collagist, but to making that kind of a pivot from one to things that look like very, very different sorts of things?
I think, first of all, you have to listen to that inner voice, and you have to commit to doing what you really want to do, even if it's just part-time or, as an avocation. And you need to do it. You just need to commit to having some time to focus on it. Secondly, I say you've got to do the research, and that also the education part of it. Find out, through research, what aspects of whatever you're going to do, what you like most, what you don't like as much. Read everything, listen to podcasts, try to, identify experts in the field, learn as much as you can and keep learning. Because, there's so much out there, and the more you can, you don't have to master, digital media, social media, podcasts, et cetera, but you need to be comfortable enough in that world, I think, to take advantage of all that it can offer, online courses and things like that. And some people really aren't very, I think more people now are getting savvy to it. And I'm really talking more about the people who weren't born into this,
who aren't the digital natives, right?
Right. Not digital natives, but, digital, kind of the digital adapters or, right. And so, having been on both sides of it, it can be a little daunting, but, I think it just offers so much to people, and just to be able to peruse all that's the opportunities that are there, in whatever area you're studying. And third, I'd say, keep at it. Don't be afraid of failure. You just have to get right back on the horse.
Right.
I've thrown away pieces, where it's like, I don't know what I was thinking, or I wasn't thinking, or whatever, they just don't work. And you just keep going. You just keep getting back to things, and you hone your talent that way. Practice.
Right.
So it, and it does pay off. I think I've become a lot happier just having this in my life. It's been really therapeutic. So even if I didn't sell anything, or nobody really, thought much of it, it would be something that I personally would continue doing, just because it makes me happy.
It looks like so much fun. And when I think about, gee, how nice it would be to sit down with some scissors and some glue and some paper and just have fun with it, because I think sometimes you get to a point where I can't do that. That's what kids do. And all of us need to make space in our brains for some fun like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you'd be amazed at what you come up with when you're just playing. And you can do certain exercises. There are books out there where they, challenge you to do, only use two colors or just use black and white, or, do one a day in a small, space, or you do it on a grid. And you can really kind of exercise your brain, and, your kind of your right brain, if you need a little exercise in that space. So it's a lot of fun. And as I said, it really can be an art, fine art. Some of the pieces that I've seen are just amazing.
Wow. Do you have a particular online resource that you would recommend to anyone?
I think you should. I think people could check out Collage magazine, KOLAJ. I don't have the actual website URL, but it'll kind of open your mind to some really interesting work. And then I often go to a lot of websites of museums all over the country. If everything from the Neon Museum in Las Vegas, which I've been to a few times.
That sounds amazing. Right?
Talk about mid-century modern, right? It's the neon world. It's a fabulous museum. Most of it's outdoors. To the Museum of Modern Art and and the Philadelphia Museum of Art and just all kinds of different museums, because museums are storytellers, right? And so even though they might not have collages that I look at art a lot and get a lot of inspiration, color combinations, a little bit of content, but mainly just how something is put together, how something looks. So it's endless.
Wow. This has been an amazing conversation, Lela. Truly, this has been absolutely inspiring. and I'm ready to go home and get out my scissors and a stack of old magazines and
absolutely.
It just sounds like fun. And I think in a time like we're in now, where there's just so much stress and anxiety and loneliness and whatever, and collage is also, it's so accessible, right?
Exactly. You don't need, scissors and glue and paper is all you need to get started. Wow. And then, from there you can, I use different substrates and I use, different kinds of glues and mediums and things like that you get as, and again, starting this whole thing before I took a class, I didn't really know a whole lot about any of it because it was something that I hadn't, when I was a kid doing it with the box, I took a Duraflame box and, covered it with magazine things, and I just had Elmer's glue or whatever I had, rubber cement, I think. It doesn't take much to do it, and to at least get started and try it. And even if it's just to relax.
Yes.
I wholeheartedly recommend it.
Put on some favorite music and snip away, right?
In fact, I've done a couple of collages inspired by music. Some of my favorite songs, and I've only done a couple, but I'd like to do more of them. And again, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, buy this or whatever, but I'm just doing it because I love it.
Fantastic, really inspiring, Lela. Thank you so much for joining us on the latest version. Thank really
you.
And
I'm so excited about your new podcast, and I look forward to, I would love to help you promote it.
Thank you.
I think it's a great subject. It's a timely subject. I think women need to get more inspiration and, hear people's stories about, how they can make a change in their lives that is really positive. So
great. Great.
Good for you.
Great.
Good for the latest version.
Thank you, Lela. Lela Goldstein, thanks so much.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks. Take care now.